Half-a-day students, I am Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. You all have been through a year of big changes. We've had to adapt and make big changes to keep our families and our island safe. But with change comes opportunity and a chance to try new things like PBS University. While Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio and I will continue to do our part to keep our island safe, you students have a part to play as well. Your part is to keep learning and to keep up with your lessons. That's why I am happy to see you here ready to learn with PBS University. PBS University is a way to bring a continuous educational curriculum to you while you stay safe at home during this time. To help you keep up with your studies, we asked our friends at PBS Guam and the Guam Department of Education to put together this episode. Thank you for doing your part and have a great lesson.
Humanities Guåhan, an independent nonprofit organization affiliated with the National Endowment for the Humanities, is dedicated to promoting public humanities programming for the people of Guam and providing foundational support and educational resources for our island community. For more information about Humanities Guåhan, visit www.humanitiesguahan.org. The following webinar series is part of a project presented by Humanities Guåhan entitled Unincorporated, Voting, Voices, and Visions Para Guåhan. This project explores CHamoru stories, experiences, and perspectives on civic engagement in relation to voting rights, democracy, political status, and CHamoru self-determination. Unincorporated consisted of the 5-part webinar series that took place from January through May 2021 and covered topics on the origins of CHamoru self-determination, the work of the Commission on Decolonization, the relationship between art and decolonization, and the role of the U.S. legal system as it relates to Guam's political status. The project culminated with the launch of an online and printed magazine distributed throughout the community, which consists of essays, creative reflections, and artwork exploring issues around Guåhan's political status and decolonization through the perspectives and historical and political experiences of the CHamoru people of Guåhan.
Remember the first time I read the territorial clause, it just blew my mind. It like contradicted everything that I was taught in school. Everything I was taught in school was, premised on this idea that, with liberty and justice for all, one nation under God, indivisible. Like all of that just went out the window with the territorial clause. The territorial clause basically says that Congress, it's up to them to decide what rights do and don't apply. I thought they're all guaranteed. What happened to that? I mean, no, not at all. Not at all. Granting US citizenship is not decolonization. It is not self-determination. I mean, at best, it's an improvement.
I think
giving
that
us a non-voting representative.
It's akin to the idea of national voting rights. Part of the discussions that we're having in these webinars have us exploring our position with national voting rights. And right. I think that there's this idea out there that because of our citizenship, we ought to be able to participate. And so I wanted to ask you, we covered this in the first segment. How do you think achieving national voting rights helps or hinders our quest for decolonization, for CHamoru self-determination, given our citizenship? What do you think about that?
National voting rights help or hinder? Well, I guess it depends. On, gosh, I hate to sound like all these questions make me sound like such a cynic when I respond. I can't help it, but I think it just depends. It depends on how our colonizer is going to use it against us. Straight up. that's pretty much how we move. We have to kind of wait and see what's going to be done, because let's just face it, U.S. citizenship, it went down like that with that one too. We were over here like political ambiguity. We're in the political purgatory. We don't know what's going on, or what are we? We're owned by the United States, but we're not. And then all of a sudden, boom, U.S. citizenship, and we thought, oh man, great. Now at least we know, where we stand and what's the deal, and that we're gonna resolve all this land grabbing, and that didn't happen. It didn't happen. That was just another way, like, okay, well, now that you're U.S. citizens, in eminent domain, boom, here you go. We do that too. We'll find a way. I think that that's the thing with national voting rights, is that yes, it can definitely change a lot of things, but at the same time, yes, it could also hinder. There could be, let's just take for example the CONCON, right? We've been asking for a UN visiting mission since the last one. The first one was in the 70s, right? 70s. CONCON was the only time that a visiting mission was approved by the United States. Let's keep in mind that the UN's not just going to show up just because Guam asked them. They still respect the protocol. They're still going to ask our colonizer if they can come. Hey, can we send a visiting mission? Is that okay with you? And it's never been approved, except during the CONCON. And if you really read and study that history and analyze what happened, that's what it was. As the United States thought, this is a great opportunity to show the UN, hey, look at this great thing that we're doing here. This is how we're gonna, remove Guam from the list of non-self-governing territories. We're gonna show them, look, we had them write a constitution. We're working with them. We're making this happen. We're supportive of their self-determination. By the way, it's important to note that the rhetoric is very different at the United Nations versus the United States. The United States doesn't say decolonization. They don't ever say it. Why? Because to decolonize means that there must be a colony. It's very difficult for the federal government to reconcile with that reality that we are a colony. You can call us a territory, an unincorporated territory. You can call us non-self-governing, whatever you want. You can call it what it is. It is a colony. We are a colony. We are colonized. They are a colonizer. It's uncomfortable, but we need to accept it. And so it depends. It could help. It could hurt. It could. We would, no matter what, we would strategize and move. We already have a strategy in place now without national voting rights. If we got national voting rights and then, the federal government turned around and was like, hey, look, they ran that same play with, the CONCON. Look at this. We gave them national voting rights. That's like, equality, or at least it's close. So maybe we can get them off that list. I think that we would turn around and leverage those national voting rights to find a way to heighten our negotiations. But see, that I guess that's the thing, is that it, on an international level, they're not all that concerned with what we are doing domestic, in a domestic sense. What they're more concerned about is what's really happening at the core of the fundamental issue, and that's what I appreciate. That's what I think is one of the major benefits of taking our fight to the UN, is that the language is not so suffocating. It's really difficult to deal with the federal government when the parameters are so narrow. The federal government is pretty, and they're pretty clear. Like, look, they like to say we support self-determination. We support self-determination for Guam. What they won't say is we support CHamoru self-determination. What they won't say is we support decolonization. But they will say we support self-determination for Guam if every registered Guam voter can vote and if the status quo is an option on the ballot. Yeah. If we did those, I bet you money. I bet you money. We did those two things. Like we made a law and we did those two things. I bet you money that the feds would send money over. They'll support us. They'd be like, oh yeah, let's do this. Visiting mission, come on over. Witness this benevolent act of self-determination. We're working with these natives to make this happen. I guarantee you that that would go down like that. But see, it questions the integrity of what it is that we're truly trying to do. Should we do, and that's what the point I was trying to make earlier, should we just, arbitrarily go and say, okay, you guys don't like this piece, let's just flip it around and let's do a 180 real quick and let's see how that works out. If we were to take those parameters, such strict parameters, we are absolutely corrupting the integrity of what it is that we are intending to do. In my opinion, that's insulting. I really feel like that's an insult to our ancestors. So all the things that we have been through, all the trauma that we've experienced, that we continue to experience, it's just pouring salt in the wound.
Kind of dismissing the whole issue and never restoring that justice for us. So, right. But we can go ahead and move on into the next segment because I think this is where you want to cover the United Nations. I do have a question that came in from one of the participants, but go ahead and continue with your presentation, and then I'll send you the question when you conclude.
Okay. So since the Davis, or even before the Davis case, as I mentioned, we had been deliberately engaging the UN, but since the Davis case, one of the important elements that I'd like to touch on is the UNPO. So in order to get there, I've already kind of talked about why we are engaging with the United Nations, but I would like to talk a little bit about how do we do that? The UN is a bureaucracy like any other. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're never going to get anywhere at the UN just by making a big splash or something. I remember being very disillusioned, thinking that we're going to go out to the UN and I'm just going to say something really moving and something is going to happen. I'm going to get somebody's attention. They're going to feel really emotionally connected to us. But it's not how it works. The UN is very much like any other governing body or legislative body. They're people like any other. There's a system like anything else. You have to engage them consistently, and you have to continue to network and expand and build relationships with other countries. That's what it's all about. You speak to any of our regional neighbors, that's the common thread among Palau, RMI, FSM, CNMI, even like all the smaller, even the Polynesian islands and the Melanesian islands that are now UN members. All of them say the same thing. It's all about building those relationships and networking with the member states. And that's how you get your support. That's how you make things move. Now, we gotta go to New York to make this happen. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not a cheap thing to do. And so we typically engage 3 times a year. We go to the regional seminar, the C24, the annual gathering of the C24, and the C4, Committee of the 24, the fourth committee. So the fourth committee oversees the 24, and then the regional seminar is like, it's almost like a fact-finding mission. So we start with the regional seminar because every year they write a resolution and there's a report given by the United States to the UN. Usually the State Department prepares a report. So they prepare this report, they send it out there. The regional seminar is where they invite us. So they ask us to come. They actually pay for us to go and engage. They usually send invitations to the head of state and to like a scholar. And this is our one and only chance to say something different other than what the State Department is saying about us or DOI is saying about us. So it's usually, it comes through the State Department, right? It's their official international arm, but they often rely on, because we're under the Interior, it's usually the Interior that will prepare our report. Now, we all know that there's problems when people speak about you or speak for you. And so the regional seminar is a great opportunity for us to get out there and say, this is what we think. That engagement heavily informs what goes into the resolution, the draft resolution that is then voted on and heard on the 24, C24. So when they gather, they basically have gotten, when they receive the draft resolution, it should include everything that was raised at the regional seminar. And then we go into the C4, right? They vote on that resolution. And then so the C24 is really that's our only chance to kind of see what did and didn't make it in, and for us to fight for it. So if there's something that we don't like, that we think is damaging or compromises us in some way, that's our only shot to say, hey, we object to this. And it's you can't just go up there on the floor and say, we don't like it, please don't do it. You got to go out there and you got to connect with these as many member states as you can. And just think about this, kid. You're going out there, you're in New York for 3 days, right? That's what we can afford. 3 days, guys. We got 3 days to hit the whole floor. And not all of them, are English speaking countries. So, figure it out. I mean, it's not an easy task. But the more that we do this, and the more familiar our faces are when we get there, the more likely it is that we can be successful, which is exactly how Palau and RMI and all our neighbors did it. Some of our friends in Micronesia have told us, we used to stand outside the cafeteria in the hallway and we just wait. We just stand there and wait. And we're like, oh, right there, that guy. And then go after them. Hey, from RMI, can I talk to you about this? And like, that's how we made friends. That's how we did it. We just went out there, we made friends. And I think it's great, because that's quite frankly, that's what we're good at, right? Pacific Islanders are very good at making friends, but it's very difficult for us to do that, to engage in that way, when that's where the engagement happens. And then this year, during COVID, there wasn't even a regional seminar, C24, C4. They passed resolutions without us. This is very challenging, very problematic. So that leads us to the UNPO. The UNPO is the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. The UNPO basically is an advocacy organization. That's what they do, is that they have members who are from countries that do not have representation at the UN level. It's created by the Dalai Lama, was instrumental in some of the international liberation work with Tibet. Palau actually used the UNPO quite successfully. And so we saw an opportunity with the UNPO. Washington, D.C. is also a member of the UNPO because, D.C. is technically a territory. This is also a very interesting point that I won't get too deep into, but we have a very fundamentally different issue than with DC, even though we kind of connect in a lot of ways, right? We're both under the American system, both kind of feeling this inequitable relationship. And then we, are both seeking help and advocacy from the UNPO, but it's a very different thing for us than it is with DC. We are an indigenous people. This is the homeland. We have been here for centuries. We have a very different approach because we are not just talking about the colonization of our people, but also of our homeland. And so in this way, when it comes to national voting rights, this is an issue this is an element that realistically could solve the DC issue. National voting rights for DC would change everything for DC. Now, I know it's not that simple. There's a lot that needs to happen, but the impact that national voting rights would have on a territory like DC is very different than the impact that national voting rights would have on an unincorporated territory like Guam. And it's because we require self-determination, whereas DC, in a lot of ways, is already they should be on a path to statehood. That's the natural step forward for them. See, the unincorporated territory status was specifically built so that there is no path to statehood. We are not an incorporated territory for a reason. We are an unincorporated territory so that it is built to be a dead end. Okay, so anyhow, I wanted to just address, there were some questions. There was a question from Robert Cruz. I just realized that there's a question and answer button here.
Yeah,
so I can read
that's
it.
the
I'm
one.
so sorry. Okay, so I was just looking at this and I just wanted to address this because this is kind of, I'm sorry, can you go back real quick to the previous slide? So before, because I want to cover Prutehi, Litekyan also. But I wanted to say, because this question here from Robert Cruz is asking about what might be done to get the attention of the nations of the world in the limbo that we remain in. There's a much more preface to this question, but I wanted to just bring this up because, the UNPO, the UN, and what we're doing with this work is important now in respect to something like, say, the Davis case, because we're done here, right? With the litigation, it's done. We appealed. We tried to appeal to the Supreme Court. That appeal was rejected and denied. Therefore, we have exhausted all domestic remedies. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing left to do in the U.S. in terms of the court, right? Now, that now creates opportunity for us. We recently, Anti-Hope Alvarez Cristobal recently filed a case with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. This is significant. It's not a GovGuam case, it's not a COD case, but there are clear implications that a case like this could have. Now, this is not like a traditional court. They're not gonna rule in our favor and then go knocking on Uncle Sam's door saying, hey, you better do the right thing or we're gonna take you to jail or something. It doesn't work like that. But what it does do is that it further amplifies our voice on an international level. It elevates the level of our issue, of our conversation, our issue. And this is significant because, let's face it, the people of the world are not paying attention to Guam. There are a lot of things that happen on Guam that if more people around the world knew about, if it was common knowledge of the level of oppression and colonization.
These webinars can be accessed on Humanities Guåhan's Facebook page. To view the online magazine associated with Unincorporated Voting, Voices, and Visions Para Guåhan, visit humanitiesguåhan.org/unincorporated.
Hafa students, I'm Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. For more than a year now, you all have continued to wash your hands and watch your distance from others, and you've done a really great job wearing your masks. We know your parents and guardians have helped you to make these changes to keep yourself and your community safe. As Governor Leon Guerrero said, we are happy you are here. We want you to continue to learn and sharpen your skills with the help of PBS University. This program is the result of a collaborative effort. We couldn't do it alone. I'd like to thank the teachers and support staff of the Guam Department of Education and PBS Guam for their work and their commitment to our students. I'd also like to thank you students for participating at home. To your parents, I'd like to thank you for taking an active role in your child's education. We are all eager to return to a time when all of us can share and study together in person. Until then, we hope you learned something new from this PBS University instruction.